Hi, I'm Sean Hoppert. I'm starting a little YouTube video series about getting into model trains. A few reasons to get into model railroading over other hobbies such as RC and model cars or model planes is it lets you do all kinds of different things. From building and planning a model railroad and layout, you can design your buildings, you can design your own trains, and you can build them. You can paint the interiors of different cars. You can custom paint the cars. You can do all kinds of different stuff that you don't get to do in many other hobbies. While you may get to build stuff with model cars and RC, there isn't the same sense of joy that I felt in those hobbies. I have been in both of them for several years. The reason I've stuck with model trains is because it's very rewarding. It's almost its own skilled trade. You learn all kinds of things from woodworking, electrical, critical thinking, design, implementation, project planning, and it's just a great way to use your skills, learn more things, and maybe even get someone else into the hobby and share it with someone you care about, whether it be a friend, family, or a loved one. So, why not give it a shot? A lot of people get turned away from model railroading because it can take up space or because they think it's really expensive. Well, it doesn't have to do either of those things. A couple of great ways to get started in model railroading is with a small set. You can usually find them on sale, or you can buy your own and make your own set for under $200, and that's a pretty good starting point. You can get a locomotive, a small loop of track, and a few freight cars for under $200 at a lot of hobby shops. Mind you, it's not the best stuff, but it's a good start. Southside Trains in Milwaukee, for instance, offers a train line locomotive from Walthers, 4 freight cars, and a full loop of track and transformer for only $150. Now that is a smoking deal, and that's a great way to get anyone involved in the hobby. Another thing you need to think about is how much space you're going to have. A 4x6 or a 4x8 sheet of plywood is usually a great way to get started. Another way to get started in model railroading, if you don't have the space for a conventional tabletop layout, is a shelf layout, which I'll show you in a moment. It's just a smaller piece of wood that usually follows a wall along a corner in another wall. And that way it doesn't take up as much space, but you get all the satisfaction of operating a model railroad. So before we go on any further, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's taken the time to watch this series. I hope that you're looking into joining model railroading and maybe bringing a few friends with you. Part 2. As I mentioned before, there are a couple of different ways to get started in the hobby. The first one is a conventional tabletop with a 4x6 or a 4x8 sheet of plywood on some framework. Another way is the shelf layout. A good way to start out with a shelf layout is just a single main line like this on the outside here, and a switch with a siding. Now you can also add a passing siding on the inside and another switch and spur on the other end. This can give you a great deal of operating while keeping it in a relatively small amount of space. Now with a conventional tabletop, you can have a continuous loop with a small town, a siding, a spur, and industries. While the shelf layout may take up less space, you are usually confined to less options, such as needing to use thin structures or just a wall or just pictures against a wall as stand-ins. Or you can even go to Walthers and you have specially designed kits to go up against walls that come out about a half inch or so that give you the appearance of a full three-dimensional structure. Now some of the pros and cons between the two are being able to do 1, the continuous run, and 2, the amount of space. You'll need to decide what scale and what kind of space you have to dedicate to your model railroad. A couple of ways to get around some of the issues with a conventional tabletop in a limited amount of space is to go ahead and find a way to either fold it up after removing your equipment and some structures if necessary, or to elevate the entire layout at the same time in your garage or basement. Another place to think about is a spare bedroom or attic. When choosing your scale, you need to take into consideration the amount of space you have. HO and O gauge can take up about the same amount of space depending on the size you actually want. If you want to go with the O scale cars and locomotives, like this Atlas car, you may need a little bit more space. I've chosen to go with a 54-inch radius for my O scale layout that I'll have later on. For the most part, the prices between HO and O gauge are about the same. This Intermountain car lists for about $35 to $45, while this Atlas O scale car listed for about $42 to $45. The prices between N-scale and HO are rather similar, N-scale being on the lower side. If you're considering HO, it would be safe to consider O gauge or N. With N-scale, you get a little bit less detail, but you can fit much more in the same amount of space as HO. HO gives you very good detail and takes up less space than O gauge. You also get a much greater variety. O scale, you get a very good amount of detail. On many of the O gauge cars I have, they have see-through walkways, individually applied wire grab irons, and operating hatches on the top. Another thing to take into consideration is what you intend to do with your layout and the age range that you're going to have operating it. If you're going to have smaller children operating the layout, it might be safer to go with O gauge. One reason for this Pepsi can is to show you the size of the cars. Compared to HO and N, I hope this gives you a good comparison as to how much space a typical freight car can take up on a layout. Sitting directly behind this O-scale freight car, I hope this is a good view and will give you a good comparison to show you how much space O-gauge can take up. Another step in building your model railroad is to decide whether or not you want DC or DCC. DC is great for getting a simple start. It's great for beginners and comes with many starter sets. Starting with a DC power pack is as simple as attaching your DC track wires to two terminals, usually located on the side or at the top end of the transformer. DCC is great for avid operators and for people who want to expand a model railroad quickly. It is also great for operating multiple engines in different directions and at different speeds on the same track. Wiring is much simpler to operate multiple locomotives than it is with DC, having to put in multiple electrical switches and plastic rail joiners to separate power. DCC is also available with some starter sets. When you get into more advanced DCC options, you can get into the Y Throttle app to work with your JMRI system. You can use this to control wirelessly through your Wi-Fi system locomotives on your layout. Another nice feature is on the app that you can purchase. You can operate up to 4 locomotives at the same time off of your tablet or your smartphone. If you have an issue with pets or kids, here are a few simple tips to help child and pet proof your layout. First of all, you should pet and child proof your layout room and your layout just like you would any other part of your home. Keep away any sharp objects, corners, or models away from your children so that they don't get damaged. A couple ideas are to raise the height of your layout or put it in a separate room like a basement, attic, or spare room that you can close the door and keep any pets or children away that you don't want near your layout. As for pets, dogs are only a problem I found when they start leaning against your layout or bumping into the legs. This can be an issue when roughhousing or when you have multiple pets that like to play around. Strong bracing and thicker legs can often help with this issue. Cats, on the other hand, are like ninjas. They'll get to and go where they pretty much want to. On layouts, under layouts, through layouts. The only thing you can really do is either train your cat to leave it alone and stay away, to behave around your layout, or to have to separate and isolate your layout completely. One issue I have found with other pets, such as mice, lizards, or other small animals, are that they can get hidden and hurt in your layout. I had a friend in Madison who had a pet lizard that crawled into a tunnel, and he didn't find out until he put a train through and he heard some funny noises coming out the one end of the tunnel. Mice can also be an issue, whether they're pets or they're wild. Gnawing through plastic, wires, trees, and making nests out of them can be a huge issue. So one key thing to remember is when you want to pet-proof or child-proof your layout, look from their height. What can they see? How can they access it? A couple other key things are to remember: to keep things away from the walls, steps, and other places where something might be able to climb or crawl up. And the reason I refer to walls is because if you have a chameleon or a lizard or a pet tarantula, they can climb those sometimes. When choosing a prototype, you have several things to consider. 1. The size of your layout. 2. The size of the curves. And 3. What year you want to model. A few other things to take into consideration are: what are some things you like about different railroads? Are you like me? Do you like the colors of the railroads and where they operate, the scenery, and the spectacle? Or do you prefer to go after how they operate or where they operate? Maybe you want to model Chicago. Do you want to do it in modern day, or do you want to do it in the 60s and 70s? Do you like passenger? Do you like freight? There are plenty of things to take into consideration, and you can never spend too much time studying and researching what you want to model. If you're like me and you pretty much like everything, it can be easy to combine things when you're not building a prototypical layout. However, for some people, it can be very difficult because it's hard to choose. If you want to model the steel industry, that opens up a wide variety of things you can do, from building structures and scenery to operating, such as getting auto racks, steel coil cars, gondolas, flat cars, and other equipment that's specific to the steel industry. If you want to operate passenger, you're going to need broader curves. Another thing is to build your own stations, platforms, make staging areas for holding extra equipment, and REA Express buildings for transferring goods, not to mention U.S. mail. If you want to do modern mixed freight, you could do refrigeration for the meat and fruit and vegetable industries. You could do grain, box freight, gondola loads of different heavy loads such as steel, scrap, equipment, and other loads. Or just about anything else your heart desires. Just remember to keep an open mind and be ready for change. I have changed 3 or 4 times since high school about what I want to model. I have decided I'm just going to do it all on a freelance layout. Remember, it's your layout. You can do whatever you like. Another thing to consider when building your layout is what kind of track do you want to use. If you want to use flex track using cork, or if you want to use a sectional track such as Cato Unitrack or Bachmann Easy Track. The simple nice thing about the snap track systems are that they simply snap together. Some of them are very rigid and flexible, and they're easy to take apart should you want to change your track plan. One of the nice things about using flex track is that it is literally very flexible. You can do just about whatever your heart desires as far as building a layout. You can fit it to the curves and the scenery of your layout much more easily. If you're going to use a sectional track system, you should have a track plan as an idea in your head already when designing the size of your layout. That way, you have any curves and other things to take into consideration, such as the spacing of track when putting in switches, crossovers, or anything else you want to build into your layout. Something you should know is when you're using a sectional track such as Bachmann Easy Track or Cato Unitrack is that they can be much more expensive. A switch can cost anywhere between $35 to $65 in the sectional track area, whereas switches from Atlas or Pico usually range between $10 and $20. This is a great way for many modelers to start, although you will need to nail or glue your track down and make sure your joiners are properly installed and applying track feeders and track power. You can find videos on laying track and building layouts on model railroader in model railroader magazines and their YouTube videos, and by going to worldsgreatesthobby.com and checking out their videos on YouTube. Woodland Scenics also offers multiple options for scenicking and ballasting track work. These options from Woodland Scenics can be applied both to the sectional track and Atlas Flex track. Before I finish my video, I want to touch on a few other things. First is, if you have a significant other or a good group of friends, you might want to get them involved in model railroading. You never know who might enjoy it. Another thing is organizing your thoughts and ideas. It's nice to have a folder on your computer and on hand to store any thoughts and ideas that you might have. Other resources are magazines and books. They're great ways to get started and to help you continue in the hobby. You can stop by your local hobby shop today, or your local book or magazine shop. They should have some model railroading books and magazines there that you can use to get started. I hope that anyone getting into model railroading knows that this is a very fun and rewarding hobby. It's great to share with your friends and family. Don't turn it into a job. Take your time. Take a half hour, an hour a week to work on your layout. You don't need to break the bank either. You can build a very nice, respectable model railroad for just $50 to $75 a month and a couple $100 up front to get started. If you can do most of the work yourself, you can save a lot of money. There is a lot of ready-to-roll products on the market, but you can still find a few kits used on eBay, at shops, and at your local shows. Don't forget to check wanted ads in the newspaper or other local listings to find layouts that may be up for sale, or auctions and rummage sales that could have trains that you're interested in. Before I go, I just want to let you know that my next video will be expanding the railroad. Right now I have a simple loop of track and a small branch line here for a shelf layout. I'm going to expand that a little bit and create a junction. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do yet, but that's all part of the fun, is figuring it out, making a plan, and putting it into action. I hope you've enjoyed this video and that you'll follow me along for more. You can check out my other videos on my YouTube channel under Sean Hoppert.